name is Anna Hardy, and I am the creative director as well as one of the environment artists for this project. My experience is primarily as a technical artist who specializes in 3D modeling, texturing, scripting, and visual design.
Hi, my name is Naomi Chandran, and I am the concept artist and an environment artist for Skybox Animation. My skill set lies within 2D and 3D graphics.
Hello, I am Jordan Honeycutt. I am a producer, lead integrator, and a technical artist for Skybox Animation. I have spent several years working in Unreal Engine, and I hope to spend several more.
Hello, my name is Kiana Bowen, and I was the character artist and motion capture director for this project before the COVID disruption. My experience primarily lies in character art and character sculpting.
Mirrored is the story of a girl who gets her voice stolen by her reflection, forcing her to travel through the mirrored dimension in order to get her stolen voice back. Originally, the charter written and signed by Skybox Animation and its sponsor George Takahashi delineated that we would deliver a 1 to 2 minute short film in the form of an MOV and MP4 file. We would also deliver documentation that would cover the creation of the film, as our goal was to help students gain a competitive edge by showcasing an industry pipeline for them, as well as the incredible work that can be produced by using that pipeline. These deliverables would also serve to showcase and promote the Envision Center's equipment, which is available for student use.
Action. 5 seconds. Cut.
We were filming test footage in the Envision Center and were about to move out of pre-production into production when we were on schedule. The Envision Center provided us with motion capture gear, a motion capture studio, and the software needed to record the motion capture data. We also received excellent guidance and counsel from our advisor, Drew Sumner. Despite everything going well, we were forced to change our plans when the COVID-19 threat escalated and shut down the Envision Center. With none of the motion capture equipment available to us any longer, we had to change the nature of our deliverables. We came to an agreement with our CGT 412 professors and sponsor that we would create an asset pack with all the assets we had made and were planning to make for the film. We also made plans to publish our asset pack on itch.io for the use of other aspiring game developers and filmmakers who would want to make a game or a film with similar story beats and horror themes. Since the representation of minority women in horror films was already on our consciousness when we started this project, we decided to make that a part of our new opportunity statement for our asset pack. Before the pandemic, our opportunity statement was, there is an opportunity to demonstrate the capabilities of motion capture to students who have not yet been exposed to advanced animation techniques. Now, our opportunity statement is, there's an opportunity to engender representation of minorities in film and in game by creating an asset pack with a minority main character for creators to use in their projects.
The first line of order before jumping into production is concept art. Here at Skybox Animation, we pride ourselves on making concept art that properly conveys the visual design, idea, and mood while remaining grounded in reality and still creative. I'm Naomi Chandran, and I'll be walking you through the concept art creation and final product. First and foremost, I start by drawing basic ideas in my sketchbook. Once I have all my ideas, the team here at Skybox Animation picks which idea is most representative of our final goal. As mentioned before, we wanted our character to represent groups and individuals who are underrepresented in media. For this reason, we wanted our character to be a woman of color. Next, I took a scan of my sketch and put it into Photoshop to begin outlining and coloring. Here you can see me doing just that. This is one of the first designs I came up with in the initial stages. Of course, our final design would turn out to be much different. Once I was happy with my final sketch, I took the final rendered image to the next stage, iteration. Further into the process, a final character concept is picked. That final character concept is then iterated upon. Here I have 4 final iterations of the character concept that was picked, and the gray box is the final design our team chose. Afterwards, I had to create concepts for the environments. I took inspiration from 2 of my favorite horror films. The first row contains screenshot of my favorite scenes in the movie Midsommar by Ari Aster. The second row contains some screenshots from spine-chilling scenes in Coraline, written by Neil Gaiman and directed by Henry Selick. What stood out to me about these scenes was not only the creepy context, but also the color choices the directors used to create a sense of unease. Both movies display a dark environment accentuated by pops of color such as purple, blue, red, and green. This in turn only upped the creepy factor. Here's the first environment concept I created. As you can see, I try to utilize those pops of colors to accentuate an otherwise dark environment. Of course, just like the character concepting process, I had to create a few iterations of the final concept. Next is the bathroom concept. This was the original concept I created based on the details provided by the script. I decided to take some liberties and use what I had learned from my favorite horror films to create a more saturated, whimsical, yet creepy concept. Of course, this went through one last iteration of combining the 2 prior concepts to create the concept that is currently displayed. The same methods and procedures were used to create the final concept of the attic. With this final concept, this concluded the conceptual phase of production. Part of the conceptual phase was creating storyboards. However, due to COVID-19, these storyboards would no longer be needed. Not only was I in charge of the concept, I was also in charge of creating the hallway and some of the attic. This included modeling the hallway and parts of the attic as I was assigned, as well as texturing the hallway. Anna will go into further details about some of the modeling principles and techniques we adopted to create the environment. My favorite part of the process was getting to hand paint some of my textures. As we can see here, I have created a custom floor texture. Due to the unconventional shape of the hallway floor, I had to design a floor texture that fit the floor shape perfectly. Anna will go into further details explaining how textures were made and applied.
As one of the environment artists, it was my job to model both bathrooms and help with modeling some of the attic. I also unwrapped all of the models in the environments and textured both bathrooms as well as the entirety of the attic. Because we did want our asset pack to be usable by game developers, we did have to pay special attention to the poly count of each of our environments. We tried to minimize the number of polygons on smaller objects that don't draw the eye as much. We also avoided smoothing objects if we didn't need to, instead just beveling the edges that needed to appear smoother. After everything had been modeled, each model needed to be unwrapped. Unwrapping is the tedious process by which UVs are organized in a 2D space so that the texture can be applied in the most attractive fashion. The goal of unwrapping is to lay the object's geometry flat while creating as few cuts as possible and making them as discrete as possible. This allows for textures to be applied in a seemingly seamless fashion in a 2D space on a 3D mesh. As for texturing, that was all done in Substance Painter. I especially had fun texturing the bathrooms. It was an interesting experiment to create the basic texture that would go in the normal bathroom, and then try to find different ways to make it look gross or scary for the mirrored bathroom. I found that using masks that detected curvature maps were essential. A curvature map is a texture that stores the convexity and concavity of a mesh, so it's perfect for finding the edge of different elements of a mesh where dirt and other substances would naturally build up. Sometimes, achieving an accurate curvature map would require baking in a normal map first, but it was well worth the effort to get this sort of effect. I would also dirty up a texture through the use of basic alpha maps, which are grayscale images that allow for the base color to show up only in white areas, grunge maps, which are alpha maps that are used specifically to make something appear to have natural wear and tear, and different brushes. Once a texture is complete, I exported it to be ready for the Unreal Engine. This results in 3 texture maps: a base color map, a normal map, and a roughness/occlusion/metallic map. Jordan will explain how all of these maps are applied to an Unreal material in the next section.
Hello, this is Kiana Bowen, and I am going to be going over the character creation and the motion capture process and how it changed before and after the COVID-19 outbreak. So my initial role for this project was to be the character artist and also the director of motion capture, because we initially were expecting to do a short film. And here you can see a couple of pictures of myself and Anna suiting up Naomi to gather some motion capture data for a dry run that we did before everything shut down. And then on the left here you can see us discussing some of the storyboards. And then here you can see a couple of clips of the test run footage that we were able to get before everything shut down. Basically what this footage is motion capture data being retargeted onto a basic untextured character just to see if the rig structure would work with the way I was wanting to recharacterize the motion capture data. And I do apologize for the video quality. This is all I was able to get before everything shut down and we lost access to the Envision Center's motion capture software. So here I'm going to be talking a little bit about the character pipeline that I used when creating the main character for this project. So first I started out sculpting the character in ZBrush, and then on that sculpted character I brought in the OBJ to Marvelous Designer, simulated the clothing, and then from there created the hair in Maya with XGen, and then created the textures for the body and clothing in Substance Painter. And then from there all of these pieces were brought into Unreal for the final render. So here you can see a simple turnaround of the character, mainly the bust up, that I created for this project. I wanted to do a lot of tertiary detailing that I realized was kind of a moot point since this was going to be for real time and none of the renders would get that close, so I kept it relatively simple with the detailing stage. Next up, I brought in that OBJ from ZBrush into Marvelous Designer and simulated the clothing. This was a pretty fast process since I am already quite comfortable with Marvelous Designer, and basically what I did was I created the sweater part first, created the shorts, and then compiled both of them together and then simulated them so that the clothing folds would be realistic with them sitting on top of each other. Next, Here we have a couple turnarounds of the XGen process in Maya, and on the top row is the main character of the film, and on the bottom row is the reflection of the film. So for the top character, I wanted her hair to be a little bit more tame than the bottom characters, and then for the reflection, which is on the bottom, as I said, I went crazy with the flyaways and just made it really messy, so she had that kind of disheveled look. And then here I have a couple of turnarounds of the clothing for both the main character and the reflection. On the top is the main characters, the bottom is the reflections again. And then for the reflections clothing, I wanted to make it super messy and also added some kind of dirt, blood spatters around to make her look really disheveled and kind of grimy. And then for the main character, I kept it really simple and just kind of added more vibrant colors than the reflection to kind of push that contrast between the two. And then here I have the final turnaround of the main character in Unreal with textures, clothing, everything. And I did want to touch on that instead of using hair cards for real time as I normally would for a real time character, I used the XGen process, which is a new process to Unreal, which kind of uses the Niagara simulation that Unreal has. So basically I had to export the XGen Groom as an Alembic cache file, figure out how to import that into Unreal, but in the end I was very, very pleased with how it looked, and it really kind of brought the whole character together. And then here I have the turnaround of the final render of the reflection, and you can see that I made her skin a lot paler, made her look a lot more disheveled, to kind of push that antagonist like contrast with the main character.
As a team, we've spent a lot of time creating the different assets for Mirrored. Characters, textures, environments, props. All of them created with high quality in mind. However, everything is spread out between several different programs. The models are in Maya, the textures are in Substance Painter, the characters are somewhere else. Nothing is in one place. To unify all of our assets together, we turned to the Unreal Engine. The first step was to import everything in our project file. I started with the environment meshes, creating a .obj file and copying everything over to the content folder in Unreal. Once the meshes were in, I created a blueprint actor. This is basically a script that you can place objects in and load them anywhere throughout a project. In this blueprint, I added every environment mesh we made, and since they were all created from the same .obj file, they naturally went to their correct positions. The next step is to add textures to everything. While the meshes in this state have UVs to tell them how to apply textures, the textures themselves were not a part of the initial import. In Unreal, textures are applied to materials, which in turn get applied to meshes. Materials allow for artists to include many different texture aspects, but the ones most important to us in this case are these. Base color, which gives the basic color for each pixel of a mesh. Normal, which allows us to add detail to a mesh without increasing the number of polygons. This is important for doing fewer calculations when the computer renders a scene. Ambient occlusion, which does calculations based on how close things are to each other. Roughness, which helps with reflections of a mesh. A rough rock won't be very reflective, in a sense. And metallic, which defines where a mesh acts like a metal. There is some overlap between the different categories, but all are important for creating a good material. Now, there are over 600 meshes within our scene, so you may think we need 600 different materials. Since a material could have an infinite number of different options changing it, having 600 different materials would bog down the computer and likely cause it to crash on many machines. There are two reasons why this isn't the case for us. First, there are several meshes that aren't unique, such as the chains on the chandelier. There are dozens of these chains, and they are identical in their geometry, and their UVs. Accounting for all the meshes, this would cut down our materials to around 200 materials. This is still way too many to handle, which brings us to our second advancement. In order to cut down this number, we found a way to use only one unique material for almost the entire scene. This is accomplished due to our master material and material instancing. To explain, here is a folder containing several textures for our scene. If you notice, there are only 3 unique files used for each texture, Thus, only 3 things are changing between each texture on our meshes. In our master material, we've taken 3 of these files and plugged them into their respective pins. Now, let's look at one of the material instances. It doesn't take us to the same screen as the master material. Instead, we only see the option to change the 3 files we plugged in before. The engine knows that it doesn't have to load any of the other settings over and over, it just has to keep track of these 3 things, saving lots of processing power for the computer, while still allowing us to have all of these unique objects in our scene. I added the characters in last. The process for adding in the characters was similar to the environment, where I added the meshes into a blueprint, plugged the textures into the materials, and added these materials to each mesh. The only different part was adding the hair for each character. We had to enable these 2 plugins for Unreal Engine to allow us to get more realistic hair imported into the project. Then, the process was as easy as adding it into our blueprint. Once all of the assets are in, it's time to light the scene. Unreal Engine has typical lighting options such as directional lights, spotlights, and point lights. I used several point lights in the scene to make it brighter, but the magic happens in the post-processing volumes seen here. When the camera enters one of these volumes, the lighting of the scene changes completely, allowing us to dramatically change the mood between each section of the environment. The hallway is more whimsical. The bathroom is more dramatic. And the attic is more muted. There are several options for changing the saturation, contrast, gamma, gain, and more in each volume, and it is the combination of these options that allow for these types of effects in our scene. Here is how the scene looks when it is placed in a level. We can have our characters interact with the environment in a game setting. Now, it's time to make it so that other people can access these assets and use them in their own projects. This is where itch.io comes in. Itch.io is a website that hosts game-related projects from indie developers. We chose this site for 2 reasons. 1, Itch.io is a respected brand that has hosted thousands of games from thousands of developers. 2, the site has low barriers to entry. Anyone can upload their assets as long as they have an account with the site. Itch.io has certain rules a publisher must follow, as listed in their terms of service. In particular, they have a strict code of acceptable use, as seen here. Anything a publisher uploads has to be non-malicious in terms of software, it can't be discriminatory towards anyone, it can't be misleading in terms of what is being offered, and it can't violate copyright law. Here at Skybox Animation, we've made sure that our offerings follow all of these rules to respect itch.io's terms. Here is our company page. It lists all of the assets we've offered under the Mirrored project. We've split it into 6 asset packs containing different files, because the max file size allowed by itch.io is 1 GB of files. Clicking on one of the pages lets you view a description and download the files. It's really cool that anyone can create something great and put it on the internet for others to view.
After all is done and said, the team here at Skybox Animation hopes that our horror asset pack will be of use to filmmakers and game developers alike. We hope this pack will provide more representation for those individuals and groups who are underrepresented in video games and film.
In conclusion, we were able to deliver on the post-COVID-19 terms of our project despite the difficulty of working from different areas of the country. We are proud to have delivered this asset pack to the itch.io community so that other developers can take part in our art and push it further with their own creative intuitions.